here talking about the film Hunky Dory.
Hi.
Figure of speech. I think most of us are pretty aware of, but always kind of wondered where that phrase came from. But what was the inspiration for the title of this film exactly?
It's also a album title.
Okay.
Do you know what album I'm referring to?
I have to say I'm not quite sure off the top of my head.
Have you
So
heard
this
of,
will be an educational experience for me.
There was a cultural icon who actually sadly passed away this year. His name was David Bowie.
Right.
David Bowie had an album called Hunky Dory.
Okay.
And when he made that album, he was dealing with becoming a father. It was when he had his kid.
Okay.
Hence the inspiration there, because the film isn't actually about David Bowie, nor is it a reference to David Bowie. The only crossover is the fact that it's a failed glam rocker, modern day glam rocker, who is sort of like the every other weekend dad, and he's struggling with his own failed aspirations. And his kid gets dropped off one day by his ex, and she disappears, and he's forced to be full-time father. So a lot of the film is about him sort of struggling to be who he needs to be in order to become a better dad, and sort of figuring out what part of himself to let go, what part of himself to hold on to. And David Bowie sings about that in his album Hunky Dory.
Right.
Hence the name Hunky Dory.
Awesome. Well, it's good to know. Okay. Now, I understand that the man playing the main part is, I saw the name, it said Barbecue. Is that the name?
No, that's not true at all.
Okay.
Barbecue is a wonderful and talented performer who has a part in the film.
Okay.
But she's not the lead in the film. No.
Yeah, I was just making sure because I did see that in the credits, but obviously I haven't.
Yeah.
So
no, that's okay. That's totally okay.
That's how we find out.
That's all right.
So you were involved in this film as a character, Sydney.
Right.
But you also were involved in the writing for this film as well.
Correct.
So how did you come about with this idea of writing along with Michael Curtis Johnson for this story?
So Michael and I have been friends for a long time. He's a very dear friend of mine. We've been friends for about 10 years. We've made some short films together. We've tried to make a few feature films together. Never really quite worked. And so I wrote this as a short. I had this idea about a man struggling with sort of hiding things from his kid and not wanting his kid to know certain things about him, but ultimately having this very sweet side to him and being a very good and kind and loving father. And I brought it to him, and I think there were it wasn't very well, like it wasn't very good, but Mike saw some stuff in it that he responded to, like he had, he really liked it. And he was, at the time, he was like a recent father. He had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So he was coming at it from a very personal to him, because he was kind of dealing with the same issues of like, needing to sort of like know, or coming to terms with like this, failed aspirations, potentially failed aspirations or not, in order to be, and like, do I let go of those in order to be a better father? So he took it and he expanded it into a feature. And then we kind of worked on it together a little bit, but he did most of the legwork there. And then he's obviously a very talented director who I was able to sort of bring life to the script. And yeah, that's kind of how we worked together.
Awesome.
But we had just finished doing a short film prior to that, that sort of lived in the same world as the world that we created for this film.
Okay, cool. So there was sort of a seamless transition going sort of from one film to the next under these circumstances. Is that how it worked out? Sort of
in this case,
filming part.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I don't think it was planned that way. I don't think I was like, oh, we just did a short film. Let's segue this into like another film. I think we were just kind of like I said, I wanted to do this. This was a story that was kind of personal to me. Part of me also really wanted to do something. Like I wanted to make another film. I wanted to get something going, and this was a story that I think was personal to me as well. And I brought it to him because it seemed like he was the right person for this type of material. It seemed like it was right up his alley, and I was right.
Yeah, I think it's often the way it works out in life is when you don't plan it, that's when kind of something great happens, so
right.
It kind of makes sense. Now, one thing that we always have to ask everybody as we're doing interviews for That Nerd Show, is that's who we are, is...
You guys are That Nerd Show?
Yes. without, hopefully no more lights will be
Too bad the
flashing
camera
for
isn't
us.
pointing at you guys right now because you both went like smiled and nodded like very prideful. Go ahead.
But something we're asking everybody this year is if you were involved in a film, would it be Star Trek or Star Wars, and why would you choose which one?
It's a great question. I'm gonna have to go with Star Wars because I feel like I have when I was a kid growing up, and I spent most of my childhood in Europe. I wasn't as exposed to Star Trek, and I don't have as much of a sort of like a personal, like an experience with it from my youth, the way that I did with Star Wars. Like I remember watching Star Wars as a little kid, and like falling in love with the Ewoks and like just the whole adventure of it. Do you know what I mean? Later on in life, I started appreciating Star Trek a lot more for what it had to offer because I'm sort of a closet science nerd. And I really appreciate all the sort of science that they brought into the show. But if I had to choose one, I think just because of like the sort of the childhood memories that I have of Star Wars, I would pick Star Wars. Like it has more like there's more history for me with Star Wars than I do with Star Trek. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Right there with you.
Yeah.
Mr. Tomas Pais, I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And, it was very informative, and
okay, cool.
It was great talking with you. Good luck with the film.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.